Second.
It's the first time we have anybody in the crowd.
Yeah, I saw Tom the other day and he was gonna be here.
I am presuming I win, are you not?
Whenever you're ready.
Presume Mike would go in too.
Okay. This is our December 6th, 2018 regular session for Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We'll do a call to order and introduction, starting with Roger.
Roger Fowler Tice.
Karen Moy.
Doug Neely?
Chris Cook.
Lisa Novak.
Sean Datchler. Troy Bollinger.
Bill Daniels. Oh, Phil Lewis.
Don't throw me off.
Oh, yeah, him.
And has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting on October 25th?
Yes.
Yes, I make a motion to approve them as written.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Formally abstain.
Carries. Okay, doesn't appear we have any citizen comments tonight. That's the first in quite a while. No presentations, and we're on to general business.
Well done, Phil.
Yeah, really.
Parks and Recreation funding.
Great. So this is at this point just a holding item. This will be a regular updated item on all of our future meetings. As you're aware, during the November joint meeting between PRAC and the City Commission, we received some direction to kind of move forward with initiating some of the process. So we'll be starting to roll out a citizen advisory committee to kind of take in information, give feedback, which will then, how I would envision it is probably a subcommittee of this group, which would then offer a recommendation to PRAC, who would then make a recommendation to the City Commission. We have not, at this point, made a determination how many will be on that Citizen Advisory Committee, how many representation of this group would be included. If there are strong feelings from this group, we could probably have that discussion now. How many, I know for the naming committee as an example, we have two representatives of this group that serve on the naming committee. Is that something that you feel would be sufficient? So I guess I'll open it up to discussion on that front.
I would suggest two people, just, that's my personal.
I think two is good,
Me too.
including, I would specify including the chair. Typically,
Okay.
they're the leader of the group that year.
When's my term up?
I was looking at you.
No,
And since we're going over the bylaws,
I would also recommend Troy being on as part of that. He's got great experience
Oh,
with the
yeah,
school
yeah.
board and their bond measure. I think that would be a good role for you.
And how will you address for citizen participation other than the folks on our
Hey, you need
board
me?
here?
Oh,
You'll be a
Yeah, to this point, we have not determined what that makeup would look like. I'm assuming we would probably put out a call to individuals to have them apply to serve on that group. We would probably also have, key folks that we'd reach out to representing specific areas. But again, we have not determined what that group looks like. I just knowing that we don't meet again until the end of January, wanting to maybe get some feedback on what this committee thinks before moving forward with starting to draw out that process.
I have an individual I think I've mentioned to you, and I know that he would be helpful in this process, and so he's retired from Metro as Chief Operations Officer for the park system, living in our community, and currently not on any board, so I would still keep in touch with him. I know he'd probably be beneficial to have on your ad hoc committee.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So is there a way to go through the process as far as nominations for people? Did you just say that we probably wouldn't be involved with getting additional citizens until when?
Yeah, so I would envision that probably within the next couple of weeks, we'll probably put out a call to we'll establish that structure and put out a call to have individuals apply for serving on that group. It would make sense to me at this meeting, maybe if it sounds like there's support for having the chair, which wouldn't be selected until our January meeting for the next year, but, to have the chair, and then sounds like some individuals would like to have Troy as a second,
Chair, and then that messes you up.
unless he's the chair.
Since we're going over the bylaws.
Would you anticipate that you could bullet point the scope of the mission of the ad hoc committee as far as what their scope would be, what they're trying to
Yeah.
achieve for you or for this group?
Yeah, so the Citizen Advisory Committee would be, again, to serve as a sounding board and make a formal recommendation to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We anticipate that we'll be doing some public polling. Any of that data as it comes back to staff, we would use that to kind of start the conversation with the advisory committee or task force, and then continue to have a conversation around, what the best steps moving forward would look like. They would, again, make that formal recommendation back to PrAC eventually, and then PrAC would make the formal recommendation to the city commission whether or not to move forward with, again, what the funding looks like, whether we're going after, again, a bond, a utility fee, what dollar amount of funding we would go after, what projects would be included on those lists. So quite a bit of information to dig through.
A timeline? Would you have a date that you'd want to have a prepared statement for commission by?
Yeah, we're looking at a 12 to 18 month process. I would envision that we probably would not make a formal recommendation until probably beginning of 2020, looking at going to a public vote sometime in either the spring of 2020, or if we don't hit that timeline, it would be the fall of 2020.
Let me put forward a question, because various options were put forward in terms of that funding. Some of those options would not require a public vote. So, if that's the direction that the committee wants to go, then we go that direction. But several alternatives that were presented to the committee do not require a public vote.
Correct, yeah. And we do have a new commission that's taking office starting in January. We'll have a goal-setting meeting with the commission coming up at the beginning of February of next year. And, one of the requests of park staff will be that we start looking at, again, the operations and needing to get additional FTE on board to maintain the parks and facilities that we do have. We know that, as we had that conversation with the joint meeting with Commission and PrAC, we have a deficit of about 8 full-time positions in parks, and we have a deficit of about 3 full-time positions in our facilities maintenance. And so trying to fill that gap as we can. Hopefully we'll be able to do some of that during the budgeting process. If we can do additional work outside of that and through the advisory group, through the task force, we'll hopefully be able to do that as well. And many things to consider and hopefully get that recommendation.
Well, keep the soon-to-be random citizen informed on the committee openings.
I'll make sure to reach out to Sean and let him know of the process.
So who are the two people now? I know of one.
The incoming chair and Troy.
Okay.
Okay, that's the recommendation.
So I don't think we need to take a formal vote or anything for this, but so at this point, the recommendation of this group sounds like the chair will be appointed in January, and then Troy as a second. And Troy, you're comfortable with serving on that group?
I think so. I'm comfortable on the group. You answered one question, which was the term. My number one priority is being a father. And so it needs to fit into that first and foremost. And so the term helps, but also how often it's going to meet. Certainly my interest is there and my commute is short, so I'm okay with all of that.
Have food home.
But I would enjoy the opportunity, so as long as it works out, I'd be happy to.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, too bad I'm not here either.
Okay, moving on. Buena Vista House.
So I have a couple of slides that I'd like to use for the presentation for the Buena Vista House.
No, I don't think you, well, he did, he took my replacement on the board. Yes,
Dan Cromer.
no. I'll think of it for a second.
And I guess we don't have any members of the community that need to see the overhead one, so hopefully
That's what I just said.
we don't need to dim the lights, I guess.
Hearing aids are coming pretty soon. Speak into the mic next time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think Bill's monitor shows it.
Phil, going back to the previous agenda item, we were just talking about the name. He's also a former PrAC member and Metro Parks employee that he's talking about. So if he can get you that name after the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
He
Yeah.
would be a very good candidate.
Great. Perfect. Excellent. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Buena Vista House. I did want to give an update on some recent activity there. As Bill emailed me earlier this week to check in a little bit. So we've been working with the stakeholder group to work on getting cost estimates for what it would take to get electricity and heat into the building. We were meeting with a contractor out there last week, and a transient had broken into the house and was using it as a temporary shelter. Had caused some damage to the interior of the house, had spray painted some of the windows on the interior, I'm assuming so people couldn't see in, and had made a general mess of kind of the facilities, had broken a section out on the window going into the bathroom so that he could get in. So there's some damage, not permanent in nature for the most part. And there was quite a few of his belongings that were left after he left. We did work with the Oregon City Police Department, and the individual was removed from the structure. We resecured the building, and everything is back to as normal as it can be there, but wanted to update you on that. I know that's been a concern of the stakeholder group. And to date, again, this is the first time this has happened, where we've had any vandalism, honestly, at that site since I've been here. The same individual had at one point broken into the restroom facility at the park a few months back, maybe 6 or 7 months back as well. And we do have, again, vandalism at various locations from time to time. And, unfortunately, it happened here. I know that the stakeholder group is looking to get additional lighting and things, and that definitely would help. But I can imagine this might have happened regardless of whether or not we had lighting or obviously heat in the building. It looks like he was trying to light the pilot light for the old gas heater that was the wall heater that's there. The gas is turned off and disconnected, so there was no issues there. But obviously it's difficult when the weather gets cold, and was looking for somewhere to be, and found a vacant house. So wanted to give you an update on that. Additionally, we did receive an estimate back from the electrician that came out to do the work, which was just under $5,000. I can pass around the estimates if you're interested. Additionally, we had an electrician come out and look at doing just the grounding work for the outlets in the building, which would be just under $1,000 to have that done additionally. So you're looking at about $6,000 for the electrical work. This would include some wall heating, electrical heating units, as well as installing some lighting on the exterior of the building.
So this is unrelated to the transient break-in.
This is unrelated to the transient break-in. Yep, correct. I did want to go through, again, we've had several conversations around, additionally around the cost of the Buena Vista House and what that would look like. So I wanted to go through, again, just a little bit of history. I realize some of you, we haven't really talked about the stakeholder group and kind of what we did and why we're here, where we're at this point. So in the spring of 2018, staff worked with a stakeholder group made of representation of this group. Roger and Karen represented PRAC, as well as Bill was on that group representing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. We had other representation from the neighborhood, including Todd Eisland, who lives across the street from the Buena Vista House and is an architect by trade. Additionally, Denise McGriff was there representing McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. We met in the months of March and April. Additionally, the facilitator that we brought in to help walk us through the process did interviews with representatives before the full group sat down in March to kind of get a better sense of their thoughts and feelings on the space and what we might be able to do to move forward. At the conclusion of the meetings, Todd Eisland had volunteered to work on developing a scope of work that would be used or could be used to solicit bids or to get estimates on how much work it would take to get the house back and open for public use. And so we did work with him on that and worked with planning and the building department to make sure that we had a scope of work that would be approved by our planning and building codes. Stakeholders also agreed to reach out to the Oregon City Park Foundation to act as a fiscal agent for the new Friends of Buena Vista House group. And it's my understanding that they've have done that and that it seems like the Park Foundation is supportive. So the construction estimates that we've received to date. So prior to having the revised scope of work, the city worked with a couple of responsive firms that have done public buildings in the area. PNC in April did an estimate for us, which came back at just over $1 million. Emmerich in May of 2018 did a similar estimate and came back at just over $800,000. And then PNC came back and did a new revised estimate based on the additional scope of work detailed by Todd in August, which came back at just under $500,000. A big piece of the Todd Eisland scope of work compared to the other pieces, majority of it is around the foundation work. So he is proposing doing a bracing foundation just on the corners and not doing a full foundation. Additionally, they did not take into consideration any design or engineering. There's no professional services line based on Todd's having volunteered his services for the project. And so there's some cost savings there as well. There were a couple of pieces that, again, that we were very broad in our conversations and the first estimates that we received around, this is the building, if we were to bring it up to be used as a public space, give us a detail of what that would look like. And so they included things on there which were not called out specifically in Todd's drawings. Todd's were a little bit more specific to the things it would take to get the building open versus the other two bids came back more of, or estimates came back more of a, professional experience in knowing what it would take to, rehab a structure like that to have it be open to the public. So there were some examples, some redoing of like the floors or the roofing, whereas I think Todd's came back a little bit different than the other two. And so there's a couple of minor variations between the two, but based on the scope of work, Todd did work with our planning department or building department to make sure that it would meet minimum specifications for a public building. Again, staff's perspective from park staff is that if we were to open it up and really make an investment of, $500,000, that we probably should look at doing a full foundation like we would of any other public building to really make the structure last and be a permanent piece of our inventory. Doing a partial foundation for the long term from our perspective doesn't make a lot of sense to not just, because you're going to have to lift the entire structure up off the current foundation and then re-pour and do everything. If you're going to do that, you might as well do a full foundation, really make sure that it's there for the long term. It's also on a hillside, and again, it would have to be stamped either way by an engineer. But given the soils and shifting that can occur right next to the hillside, it would probably make a lot of sense to invest in doing a full foundation on a structure like that.
I would presume any modern structure would require full foundations in terms of just seismic requirements, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and again, not my area of expertise, and Todd is a licensed and bonded professional, but and it would have to be stamped, engineered drawings would have to be stamped in order to pass the building officials' needs. But yeah, it would be probably advantageous for us to make sure that it was a full foundation for the longevity of the structure. Better to do it once right than to have to come back later and do more work, which can often be more expensive. And thank you. So that's where we're at. But I know we've had several conversations around, where I've kind of just thrown the numbers out and said it's around this amount, it's around that amount. As we're digging into, I know that we have obviously some stakeholders that really want to get the electricity on and want to get heat in the building, and we're going through those steps. I just want to make sure that this group understands the full breadth of what that full investment will look like eventually, if we're moving towards that, and that we just have that conversation. So with that, I'll open up to any discussion or questions or anything else you'd like to discuss.
This makes me wonder, ancient buildings, how they've survived so many years. I think of Notre Dame or the Tower of Pisa. All these years, how did they find funding for these buildings to last? Tourists. Oh,
But
boy.
it'd be very difficult to really occupy the Lee Tower Pizza.
Well, that's true. Yeah. But Notre Dame, you could occupy them.
I would just make a comment that in light of the recent list of funding deficiencies in the department, that just because we're discussing this doesn't mean it's first on the list. And in my opinion, we should be mindful that that list is $27 million, and at some point there needs to be a priority list given. And so I would encourage you, especially as the new commission comes in, to not let things get taken out from under you and move to the front of the list without having a valid discussion as to what the priority list really should look like. Because, there's neighborhoods that are 3 miles from a park. Other issues like that could be more important. There's new development going in that we haven't land banked for. So while I'd love to spend the money on this, that other list has still got me full of sticker shock. And
That's right.
so that's just my comments. Agree.
Well, the only thing is this has potential with the Friends Group forming for some fundraising. It also has grant potential. So I think as long as we keep it a live subject before this group, that may help some of the outside fundraising.
We need to preserve our history. It's easy to bulldoze it down because it's cost effective. But the people who are happiest when it's over with, that you save something, even though it was a struggle. In the long run, that makes a big difference.
And I guess to clarify my point, I don't disagree with you, but as you get new members in next year, those members sometimes just see what's on the agenda, but they lose sight of 5 years ago topics of Beaver Creek Concept Plan or Park Place. And all of a sudden, just because Phil puts this on the agenda for the last 3 months, you think it's a big deal, when if you don't have the discussion, it maybe isn't as important as a couple of those other things.
And that makes me wonder, as a group, should we be prioritizing, once we get a little bit further along, our needs?
So we used to, and this year we postponed our goal setting and never picked it back up. So next year, you guys really need to do that and pick it up. And generally, we put more emphasis, once the commission went to the 2-year cycle, we put more emphasis on that 2 year. So this next year,
Should be it.
multiple work sessions early in the year to get that nailed down. And my personal opinion was always putting things on there that are tangible that you can accomplish in that time. And then a few beyond it that are your next ones to then move on the list. Don't just throw stuff on the wall that you really can't touch. And if you look at our recent list, we've accomplished those.
Yeah, I think that's good, but if we're looking for the funding, I mean, it comes to your priority list really too, but if we're looking to move to taxpayer funding or funding through utility bills or whatever, we have to have a long-range view of it. And
Right.
it can't be what we're doing this year and a few for the next 2 year period. Because in order to push that forward, people have to be aware of, A, we're really deficient, and B, what's needed for it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it all comes together in the Parks Master Plan that hasn't been revisited in how many years? And I think we use that as kind of the catalyst to set the priorities and have that long-term vision. Because I think back when that was made, we had a long-term vision.
Yeah.
It was way before my time, and it's now time to revisit that.
Yeah.
And reset.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that should occur next year as well.
A couple, are we still on Buena Vista or?
Yeah, that's, you got screens to this.
Loosely, yes.
Every month.
So, a couple of things, and I don't know if you were gonna mention anything, if you were gonna say anything, Bill? or-
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, Bill came to the foundation, Parks Foundation meeting, and regarding getting enough electricity to keep the place warm enough so that it can stabilize it to be able to go forward. And the foundation agreed to donate up to $1,500. And then
Our McLaughlin Neighborhood Association is meeting tonight at the same time, and we're putting a motion forward for that kind of a donation from them as well.
Wow, you're getting there.
So just to get it to that point, and in the past, I've seen grants, in a lot of historical building grants in there, out there, and to, maybe that would help with this and wouldn't even be on, it'd be above and beyond what the city or the Parks Department, would have to put in. The only question we had was how much, one of the members had asked how much it costs to provide electricity to the house per month. So, and we didn't, that wasn't in that, I don't know if you brought that answer to,
maybe we
or
should
that
ask
question to Phil.
Yeah, baseboard heating's a little bit more expensive than standard heating. We wouldn't have to keep it at the same level as you would if your house.
Right.
It's not a huge space, but it's also not well insulated, or, doesn't have some of those same things. So it wouldn't be overly expensive, but it would be an ongoing recurring cost for the department.
So I would encourage you to reach out to PGE. They could probably actually give you an estimate based on what you have in there. They could provide that estimate for you based on the appliances.
I think we discussed it at the meeting, right? To get, what was that called? They get an assessment for the building itself. And I think somebody looked it up, and it was on the list of buildings that PG would come in and give you an estimate on.
For an energy audit?
It's an energy
Yeah,
audit, it's
energy
free,
audit,
it's a
thank
free of charge.
Okay.
So I could actually I can get you out to.
There are some very small, inefficient heaters available that would just keep it warm enough so that it keep the mold out and
Moisture.
moisture. That's what we're looking at.
I'll find a name for you, a resource, a
Okay.
PGE that will come out and do the audit for you. Or at least, it wouldn't be like an audit where they're actually looking at what's in there now, but you can provide like this estimate that you have today, what the need is, and they can provide an estimate, what it would cost monthly. And they probably have to look at it, it's probably no insulation in that place whatsoever.
Newspaper.
Rat's nest.
But, I just want to say one more thing. I think I mentioned that last year, or about a year and a half, we took a trip up to Port Townsend. And just to see a city very similar to Oregon City in the way it's laid out, and that the downtown is lower down, just like we have here. But the amount of work, and it's a population of 9,000 people. And what they're doing to their downtown is just amazing. And how they're saving all their old buildings. And, just keeping that history right there is just, mind-boggling to see and just wonderful. And the amount of energy that's driving from that, from the citizens, how they appreciate their city and the tourism that is attracted with it and the money. So that, just to lay out those thoughts going forward.
Of course, Oregon City has done a great job in its downtown too.
Okay. Any other discussion around Buena Vista House? Thanks, Phil. Willamette Falls Legacy Project. Anything new there?
So the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, we have a RFP which closed recently for design services for the phase 1 development of the Riverwalk. They closed on November 29th. We are anticipating probably making an announcement sometime mid-December. And we also have a December 20th partners meeting, so that's all the elected officials from all of the agencies that are involved in the project. So it's a public meeting. Everyone is welcome to attend. That will be the time and location will be announced shortly, but it is scheduled for December 20th. Other than that, we are still moving forward with kind of the general timeline that we're anticipating breaking ground sometime in the spring of 2020. We're obviously a little bit behind schedule on that to date, but we're hoping we can ramp up and get things going quickly on that.
Nice. Okay. PrAC annual election of officers.
So this is just a reminder item. The first meeting in January will be your opportunity to elect your chair and vice chair. So just putting that out there for any members that will still be with us coming January 1. If you have an interest or if you think someone would be well suited for one of those leadership positions on this committee that may make yourself known or make it known that you think someone else would be a good leader for this group and touch base with them. But we'll be accepting nominations at the first part of the January meeting for the chair and vice chair positions.
And that's on 24th, is that right?
I should have that.
Yeah.
Yes, January 24th.
Okay.
You really want me at the first meeting?
Okay. PrAC member position openings, appointment recommendations, back to the conversation.
I'm going to make a motion that we request that we accept applications up to the next meeting, and that we do not make any decisions on recommending appointments until we've had an opportunity to interview more candidates.
I second that motion.
So, just a question for the group, and why wouldn't we consider the one candidate we had tonight that we know is eligible. So
Because
we
we
get
don't
him
know-
on board,
We don't know what the other candidates are.
but we have 2 other open positions too, so.
But you may get 5 applications.
Yeah, okay. I'm fine with that. Yeah. So there's a motion on the committee.
So we have a motion and a second. We can continue the conversation unless you want me to take a vote.
Any other conversation?
I'll have one afterwards.
Let's take a vote.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to hold on any recommendations until we have a full pool and additional interviews. Is that correct?
Clarification, are you talking about the Pioneer Center position?
We're talking about everything right now.
Both.
Both.
3.
Because it's still open.
Everything.
Everything would be open.
But are we saying that Ms. Miller is still eligible?
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's the case,
Well,
based on the bylaws.
yeah.
So my point is, I don't want to leave her hanging,
I agree.
thinking that she might get a position if she's not eligible.
So
I don't think that's fair.
are we interpreting, I mean, I wasn't clear on when we had that discussion earlier, we're interpreting the fact that she lives in the McLaughlin neighborhood. It makes her ineligible to serve on a dedicated position, which is she's not one of the at-large members.
I'm going to request that Mr. Lewis consult the attorney. We have these things in 2 different aspects of the bylaws. To consult the attorney whether or not, given that that position is covered in another part of the bylaws, whether the second part of the bylaws is relevant, and actually look for legal clarification on that.
That's a good point.
That's fine.
I can follow up.
Yeah, and so we might have it clear at that point, so it may not be an issue if the attorney makes the interpretation. What the attorney may actually do it before the next commission meeting, because what the attorney may do is, it is up to, say to the commission, the commission can interpret its own code, and it could go to the bylaws as well. Did that position separate from the other part of the bylaws? And my guess is nobody thought about the 2 issues. So if we could do that, and then we could have clarifications at the next meeting, and not tell her that she's not eligible at this point, that we can make a legal determination.
And that's fine. And my stance is I think it was written that way for a reason. But
Yeah, I think we did it intentionally when we wrote it.
Yeah.
That 2, no more than 2, period,
Yeah.
was very intentional at that time. But
But I think that was for the at-large positions. I don't think it was for the dedicated position.
I think at the time we were concerned that you may get 4 or 5 from one neighborhood association and divert funding and everything else.
We were concerned about that, but it was a maximum of 2 at the at-large positions. But the only dedicated position, it didn't matter what neighborhood they lived in.
So bottom line, we would like to have an opinion, and it would probably might help, but maybe it won't, to listen to this conversation tonight when they, just to hear our thoughts on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm assuming between now and the next time we meet, we can have a determination. Hopefully we'll have some additional candidates. We can hopefully schedule additional interviews and continue to move forward.
So the current motion stands unamended, just that we are going to keep the positions, or recommend that the positions stay open until we have more candidates.
So do we need to amend that motion?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's,
It sounds like you're all in, well, it sounds like you're in agreement with that. So
so,
I have a first and a second, and unless there's further discussion, I can take roll.
yeah.
Okay. Daniels,
Aye.
Ballinger,
Aye.
Daschler,
Aye.
Novak,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Neely,
All right.
Maury,
Aye.
Fowler Tice,
Aye.
and the motion passes. I guess the other point of consideration is whether or not you would like to vote to have Sean continue in his current role until we have an appointment to fill that position.
So moved.
Second.
So a discussion would possibly, I thought about this as well. He could, would it be any less of a problem, shall we say, if he was a non-voting member at the time? He could contribute as far as knowledge or opinions, but be a non-voting member, so he's actually not following a term through without having to sit out for that.
A consultant type of role, knowledge role.
Right.
I would
think
say
the
that
bylaws
any,
speak to that, though.
yeah, that would be creating a kind of a new,
Yeah, but what now?
any community member is welcome to attend and give public comment during any of the topics. And so if somebody was not on the committee, they're welcome to attend a public meeting and give comment. I think that's basically the role that he would be serving in that,
Okay.
in that role. My interpretation of is that we're asking if he wants to continue in his current role.
I think there's more value in having him as a voting member until we fill that role, or those roles.
Well, and I've got to say, you've got 3 vacancies, and you're now recommending that one person be voted on to stay in one of those 3 positions
We're making a recommendation to the mayor to keep him on until we fill those
in violation of
positions.
the bylaws.
No, the bylaws speak to this exception, right? Is if we have a member,
It's been acting practice to have a member continue if we do not have enough members to
so
fill.
the precedent's been set.
So then technically Mike and Roger also should be continued.
No,
that
if they're interested, I think, Karen, I think if they're interested, we can make a motion for the same reason, but I would disagree that they then have to continue. I mean,
I'd be happy to have the motion amended to those positions that are vacant, if the individuals are willing to serve in that capacity, I'll amend the motion.
and I'll second that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good recommendation, and then they have the option of choosing to do that or not.
I think for the continuity of the committee and our work, I think that makes sense.
But if they don't come 2 times, I'm excused that we're gonna boot them off.
That just shows you they didn't want to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, do you want to clarify your motion again? Who made the motion?
Well, and I guess we have, I know,
I made the motion originally, I think.
just for information for the group, I know that Mike has said that he does not have the time to continue with this group. And so I imagine his response would be that he probably does not have time to continue. And it might be of benefit to ask Roger if he's interested in continuing if.
Well,
before we
it's a
make that.
time business for me. That's part of it too.
But in fairness, I made the motion, should they be one?
Yeah, I think the motion should be to recommend that they are given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And based on the fact that we're continuing to keep the application process open.
Yeah.
So we're not going to meet the deadline of end of the year. And so I think that's where the question comes in.
So does somebody else want to try the motion over?
Actually, I
Troy,
think
do you
we
want to
did
give
it
it?
well.
So
I'm clear on
Oh,
think we're clear, but
I'm withdrawing my motion at this.
Okay, then I'll second your withdrawal, and I will make a motion, just so we're more clear and muddy. I'll make a motion that we recommend that those whose terms are expiring are given the option to continue until their positions are filled.
Second.
sorry, making notes. Unless there's further comments, I can take roll.
Please.
Good. Daniels.
Aye.
Ballinger.
Aye.
Daschler.
I'll abstain.
Well played. Novak.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Neely.
Aye?
Maury.
Aye.
Fellertais.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Now, after the vote, I will just put out that I see right here the next meeting is probably the first one in the last 2 years I will probably miss. It's my anniversary, and there's a higher authority I need to answer to on that day.
Bring her along.
I think it's a great night. There will be snacks in the back. Hey, we'll call that dinner.
Veggie tray. Yeah.
Is a higher authority willing to apply for a position in the practice?
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
I would encourage it, but I guarantee I know the answer.
All right. Other general business?
We did have one item that Mr. Daschler wanted to bring up.
Oh, thank you. So, dealing with membership, many years ago, we had, and I don't remember the reason, Scott Archer brought it to us, that there was a young man from the high school that wanted civic experience. And so we brought him on as a ex officio or non-voting member, and he sat right there, if you will, in a different room, but, and participated in all the discussion, was part of the civic process. And for him, it was an educational opportunity, a resume builder. For us, we gained the benefit of speaking to somebody in that age bracket, and it worked very well. So recently, a gal I know from the VFW whose son is trying to pad his resume for one of the military academies was complaining openly, just her and I, about he needs some sort of other civic involvement, and I don't have any idea what to do. And so this topic came up, and he's extremely interested. And so I brought it up to Chris and Phil, and then when I reached out to Phil again the other day, his suggestion made a lot of sense, that if the group liked that idea, then we should just open it up and obviously interview that interested candidate, but maybe there's others that are more suitable, and that's part of the civic process he would have to learn. But, so that's my suggestion. I never saw a downside to it. Obviously, if the student decides to be a non-participant and not show up, the rules would just apply the same. You know, a couple times you don't show up, you're done, and things like that. But there's really no downside to it, and there wasn't when we did it in the past. So I'll throw that out there.
I think it's an awesome idea. I mean, I've had experience working with interns at my job, and I know that does nothing but help them and prepare them for the real world. I think it's a great idea.
Is that back to needing a bylaw revision?
Since the person's a non-voting,
just
since the
declare-
person's a non-voting position, I'm not sure we have to worry too much about it.
Well, and that could be one of these special votes by the commission. We could vote to create an ex officio position for a student and ask the commission to approve it. That's that other nice little bylaw in there that says we can do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's always
I
good to
love
get information from folks from different backgrounds, and I really appreciate you bringing this forward, because I think it would be something that, maybe we would look at reaching out to the high school and reaching out to all the junior classes, for future years, and saying, starting, August of every year or September of every year, we have a high school senior that serves in that capacity, or a high school junior, or whatever we determine. It might be a good idea to wrap it around a school year kind of commitment, as opposed to a calendar year commitment for that group.
So Phil, could you consult staff and find out what exactly we would need to do on this side to make that happen?
Yeah, definitely. I'm assuming, so the individual probably would be interested in interviewing sooner than later for a position. We could probably put out that if you guys are in agreement, and it sounds like everyone is generally supportive, we could probably put out additional advertising for not only the open positions for the actual position, but for this new position as well.
Yes.
And maybe find out, determine whether we really need a bylaw component if the person's a non-voting member. My concern is that if it doesn't work out in the long run to keep people, that we go through this process of trying to recruit some position that we're not going to be able to find anybody to fill. And if it's not, if we don't have to go through that formal, I mean, we want to do it now, but if we find out that it's not a long-term viable thing, it'd be just nice to not have it in our bylaws to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing to consider, though, is if this person doesn't pan out or show up, what's the removal process, or what's the formal process for finding somebody else to fill that role? So that's why I would like to have staff's opinion on that.
Yeah, I can do some research and figure out a best case to move forward, and I'll just communicate through email with the group.
Yeah, that said, I think we want to move on this, not wait till our next meeting. And get a position or an opinion either way.
Yeah, I can research the best way to move forward, and then, again, hopefully we can start advertising for it, and then hopefully whenever we interview for the other positions, we can also interview for this position.
And when you mention advertising, are you speaking to like our social media
Social
specialists?
media platforms,
Okay.
and, yep.
Chris?
Yes.
Recommendation I have on that, you mentioned a junior or senior. I would recommend we don't attach it to a graduating or a class name. It's just so we can, it can also include those who may be homeschooled, maybe aren't attached through some other college program that they're in, that they're not necessarily a junior or a senior or a sophomore. And then I would recommend that maybe we consider starting that not September, but rather October. So school is underway. We can use the student body, the political classes, and different things like that to kind of gain interest. Maybe then applications possibly through the end of September, start in October, and maybe go 12 months, or maybe have it just be through end of June or something. Just understanding that some of those kids are going to be busy in the summer, they're going to want to move on, and they're just not going to be able to be here. And we don't want to have them say, well, gosh, I'm going to miss 2 meetings, I'm not even going to ask. That's a good point. Just a couple of ideas I have.
Yeah, I would concur with both those. In fact, in this particular case, he's a sophomore, because by the time you're a junior, you need to know where you're going. Sure.
I would suggest some level of class level, maybe high school. When they're,
Well, you could put an age.
yeah, that's it.
You could put 16. I mean, we're late at night, they're going to be driving home, you got some things to consider.
We're just finding out is, can we do this at this point?
Yeah.
We'll be coming in, and we can have a further discussion about the process.
Work out the details
Except for the fact
later.
16's a junior.
Or 15 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and understanding the time of night and whatnot.
And I think you guys should all know that chances are they're going to be intimidated and a little skittish. And I found myself pulling the answers out, but the answers you received were really good. You just needed to kind of, oh, by the way, so what do you think? You know, you need to kind of bring it out of them, whoever they are.
This group intimidates me too, so it's all right. Don't get over it.
And we feed you.
And you feed me.
Okay. Member reports? Roger?
Pioneer updates, Pioneer Center updates. 3 Pioneer giving trees are up, and all the tags are taken. More items are coming in regularly. Our fundraising annual appeal was mailed, and donations are returned daily. A final count will be given in January of accepted donations. Christmas wreaths were picked up and handed out last week. A few seed candy boxes are still available for sale, but this was a very popular fundraiser. Patron Christmas party will be December 21st with a catered meal from the Bomber and a gift, as well as a poinsettia to take home. The Pioneer Center will be closed the 24th and 25th of December. The Pioneer Center will be helping the Gladstone Senior Center deliver meals on wheels, on wheels for several weeks until their kitchen is remodeled. As far as my own updates, as far as the funding, since I might not be here again after tonight, I'd like you to consider. I know this is getting ahead of things, but just something to consider, that in the past, the city has done a lot of open meetings at the library or the Pioneer Center, and more of inviting the public in to be able to actively talk to them. And the funding, that might be a really good route to go, and discuss funding, different funding approaches so that they can clearly understand it. And You could make it a big event and invite groups like Doug's group, the trails, the watershed, I don't think there's a trails group anymore, I'm not sure. And the Parks Foundation would be probably happy to be there. And open it up and try to get people to come in and discuss it with them, because that would be great PR ahead of getting people to understand the needs and what has to happen to help the parks. I'd like to take this time to thank Kathy Wiseman and staff for letting me hold this position for here to represent them. And thank you, Phil, and the rest of you. It's been great working with you. I'm sorry to have to leave, but the Parks Foundation is just starting to take a lot of time. And the hours I'm working on parks is getting bigger than in my yard, so so I'm up against that part. And that's it. Thank you.
Could I interrupt before we go through there? I think he deserves a round of applause for his time. He does great
Definitely.
support.
So in November, the JROTC did their semi-annual cemetery cleaning, and I was a wimp and didn't go. But the mayor graciously posted some photographs of the kids doing their usual excellent work, and they'll be back in May to spruce things up for Memorial Day. We're going to have another community cleanup either late April or mid-May. We're not quite sure at the moment. And we had a small but rousing Rivercrest Neighborhood Association meeting. There are still problems at the top of Waterboard Park. There was an incident where there was an assault and the police were called. And the neighbors are now getting together, and at this point, they are circulating a petition to get more voices to come in on, yes, there's a problem, we need a solution, and the intention is at some point to present that at a city commission meeting. Because the people who live even 2 and 3 blocks away because of the traffic coming and going, are very, very adversely affected by what's going on up there. So we've kept Phil and Jim Band and John Lewis in the loop on how they're feeling.
So it's just like the local hangout now?
Actually, from some of the information we've gotten from the police department, it's not local. This is not Oregon City people that are hanging out there. There may be a few, but they're coming in, drug deals, fights, loud music, language you really don't want to have to hear from your back deck. And, we had the one fall over the summer and now an assault. So, and a lot of speeding traffic to and from the area. So, not sure what'll be the final solution, but the neighbors are banding together.
Good. Doug?
I'm going to reserve my comments because I would request that I, as the chair of the Natural Resource Committee, be put on to the presentation piece to talk about items that we have come forward with that we want to pursue in the coming biennium that would also affect parks and so forth. So I'll reserve that time for that. I did want to make a comment on something, and I don't question there's a problem up there, but it is one of my weekly walking places that I go to when I go downtown to one of the bakeries. The time period I hit there are teenagers there. I've sat and talked to them, and they aren't involved in any of these activities. So, and I don't question that those things are going on. Don't misunderstand me, but my fear is that we do something that keeps you feeling that they're not wanted there, even though their behavior doesn't warrant it. And so I just want to throw that out there. I mean, I sat and talked to those kids. They appeared nothing to be been going on in the cars. None of them were even smoking or anything. They seem to be appreciating this great view. So I just want to make that comment.
The others.
Did you, Doug, I was reading the notes from your Natural Resources Committee. I picked that up in the
Well, that's
bathroom.
where they ended up.
Do you want this back?
Yes. But
And I
that's
know-
what I will talk about.
And I noticed something about Waterboard Park in here being. by
Yeah, that's
Dr.
one of the things I want to let you talk about.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have anything at this time.
Park Place Park, went down walking yesterday. It's still not a park. It's still, there's still trucks, there's still construction vehicles. Is there any updates as far as,
Perpetual sewer work.
Yeah, I have not been on site in the last week or so, but they're wrapping up. The construction work has completed for the pipe work to create the duplicate supply line system that they were trying to install. So that has been completed as of mid-November. We are working with them right now on replanting of trees on the property. They'll begin to start to move out of the park, and then we'll probably see some additional refurbishing of the park as we move into the spring. So overseeding, aeration, those types of things to get the turf and things back into order.
now is that the contractor
Correct.
that's responsible? So funding is not an issue?
No, it's all part of the project and anticipated to be funded by the water district and the contractor.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So I have two things. The first one, I think that everybody in this group should be extremely proud that the commission last night voted to affirm Tyrone Woods Memorial Park. So that naming process is done and complete, and was, while we had questions with the process, it was still by far probably the best process the city has ever undertaken, and we've learned and can improve it for the next time. So, and I wrote notes about you, Roger. I wanted to personally thank you for your time. You've been an inspiration to me. The amount of time you put into parks, I've seen your truck in the security cameras up at the VFW dumping bark dust, pulling weeds. I didn't realize how much time you put in until I really started kind of thinking about it, and it's amazing. Plus, I don't know if this is totally accurate, but Mike likes to say that you're the inspiration and the reason the Oregon City Parks Foundation took off. And to me, still, that is one of the best civic achievements in this city since I've been involved in doing this, that somebody actually took the idea and put it on paper and ran with that, because that's exactly what we needed. Where else has somebody just decided, I'm going to create this wonderful nonprofit for something I see that's needed in my community and affect parks? That's why we're all here. So you've inspired me. I hope that I'm as active as you are when I am the Pioneer Community Center rep.
Perfect.
Thank you, that's very kind.
Thank you.
I have nothing.
Nothing, no.
Okay. Staff reports.
Okay, so the recreation report you should have received from Denise via email. The Charter Park updates. So last night at the commission meeting, we had a second reading of Charter Parks for Kenneum Slope Park, Strait Pioneer Cemetery, Stafford Park, and the Pioneer Center. So those are all now officially recognized as Charter Parks and have those protections. Old Kenema Park received a first reading at the meeting last week, and then we're anticipating the second reading coming up later on this month in December. We do still have a few other parks that are still waiting through the process of updating lines and doing some of the behind the scenes work that needs to happen. The cemetery will most likely be the next one that moves forward. We just need to complete the ordinance language and the exhibits that will be attached to it, and that should be coming forward, if not at the end of December, then definitely at the beginning of the next year. And then the only other thing that I have to report again is the Tyrannus Woods naming, which again was a great experience to be at. Cheryl, Tyrone's mother, was very appreciative. She really wanted to thank this group, and I talked with her in the hallway after the meeting a little bit, and she was just obviously moved and expressed her deep gratitude to this group and to staff and to everyone that was involved in the process. So I thank you for your thorough vetting of the naming, and I think it will serve, to Sean's point, as an example for us moving forward. So thank you.
Okay, future agenda items? Any?
Clackamas Park.
And I think you need your goal setting.
And actually, I now
Yeah.
second that because of some conversations I've been having about the trailer park,
RV park?
RV park location. So I second with Bill that the Clackamas planning needs to be done.
And I think, to Sean's point, the goal setting needs to be discussed, at least some planning around that, maybe the next meeting. And then probably a discussion around the Parks Master Plan and what or when we can revisit that. That's probably a whole group of work sessions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we do have, that's one of the items that staff have moved forward for consideration by the commission. So hopefully, we recognize, I think we've had these conversations as a group, that's something that needs to be addressed, and staff is committed to hopefully move that item forward.
That's probably an important point too, when we go to interview more folks for these positions, and that's probably going to be a time commitment unto itself, getting through that. So just
I can do it.
awareness for them.
Is there,
You know that.
is there any discussion at the commission level of revisiting the comprehensive plan, which is pretty old at this point, the city's comprehensive plan? Do you know of any discussion at the city commission?
Each of the department heads met with the city manager and to kind of go through items that we thought were important to move forward for consideration by the commission. I know that that's something that came up, I think, in the planning committee or commission made a recommendation to the city commission at the last meeting as well. So I'm sure that'll be something that'll be talked about.
The thing is, what you're suggesting is something that probably should be partially a focus of our effort in terms of the parks and in terms of comprehensive plans.
It is a component of the comprehensive plan and adopted as such, once it is adopted. So it will be a portion of the comp plan for the city.
Yeah, and the point is, this would be a great opportunity to us give input into the process.
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
your point?
Definitely.
And Phil overstating the obvious, but I would recommend you send out the goals in an email to the group. And maybe since we've just discussed it, if you could do it in the next few days, and then again, coming, just before the January meeting, just so it's real front and center.
Yeah, I can send those out again.
Beneficial, I think.
Yeah, and I think within that email, solicit feedback from the group on what, are the current goals we have earmarked sufficient or appropriate? And if not, then let's provide some ahead of that meeting so we have some time to disseminate.
One of the fears we've had in the past was lack of framework, and so I hope that somebody will kind of guide a framework, because it seems to me if you have kind of like when I was chair, I tried to say, here's what we can reach now, and here's that next group of things, and to me, I can focus on that. And what I've seen happen in years past is we lose focus because we can't. There's all these ideas, and we literally spend an hour of a meeting, and nothing hits the paper. And so I would recommend that you guys contain that, or else you're going to have a problem.
When's the retreat?
The city commission retreat is February 1st, 2nd, I believe.
Okay, I would say with two new commissioners coming on, it might be a nice idea to hold our goals till we see the city goals.
I have two opinions on that. One is, I don't think they ever, while they directly relate, I don't think that their goals ever really conflict. So you can, and it's your guys' prerogative. I'll back out of that. But
I think it is helpful to start the conversation now. And if we feel like we need to hold off, that's great. But I think we need, just based on where I've seen conversations go on this committee, I think we need to have the conversation now and start documenting our thoughts and.
Well, and frankly, you could put, so say, for example, you're able to get a draft in January, Phil can take that draft to the retreat.
Yeah.
And that helps drive their conversation versus them driving yours.
Or, yeah, and they can provide feedback too.
Absolutely. So,
A draft would be a good idea. I was just thinking about if you finalize them ahead.
oh,
of the-
no, yeah, and there's
Okay.
no need to do that. But get something on paper, I would recommend.
Will we see any more charter parks by the next meeting, nominations?
Possibly. Yeah, we have a handful of parks, I think 5 or 6 that you have not, well, actually, let me rephrase that. We have 5 or 6 that have not been adopted yet or have been considered by the commission. We have probably, I think, 4 that you have not seen yet, which we should be bringing forward once we have additional information. Some of them are a little complicated. The promenade just has some wonkiness to
The survey issue?
yeah,
Issue of the
just
survey?
making sure we know the boundaries correctly, and but I can bring that forward. The other thing that for a future agenda item that will probably be on January is discussing a piece of property that is part of the, well, was part of the Newell Creek Canyon master planning process, but it's actually owned by the city and considered a park property. So deciding whether or not we want to work with Metro under a contract and agreement with them, an IGA, or whether or not we want to transfer ownership of the property to be used for part of the Newell Creek Canyon development. So that'll be coming up in January, and then we'll make a recommendation to the city commission whether or not we should enter into an IGA or transfer the property permanently to Metro.
Or do something else. Right.
Not that I'm suggesting it's a discussion, but which property is that?
It's, oh goodness, 14 acres directly behind the cemetery property. There's a small development.
That oddball addition.
Yeah, so there's,
Okay.
if you remember
Oh, that's
when
neat.
Metro staff was here and talked about the trail connecting to the neighborhood to the north. And it would have a trailhead, but not parking, dedicated parking or anything like that. It actually goes through that property to connect to that neighborhood.
No, okay, I know where it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll have a presentation with visuals, and we can definitely have that conversation. Metro would prefer, obviously, to have ownership. I think the city's position is there, it's gone through a master planning process in our community. It'll be used for our community members. Whether or not it's through an IGA or through a transfer, I think it'll be used for the better good. But we'll have that conversation for sure.
One last thing, that's really quick. Portland Parks uses a designation of what type of park that a user is looking at. And I saw those designations that Oregon City had on there when we were looking at that first sheet of candidates for charter parks. And there was 3 different designations, the regional parks, our community parks, and our neighborhood parks. And then fourthly, there's the special use parks. And I'm wondering if some of those parks, I mean, there is a use of that designation for parks for the general public in a sense. I know that, for instance, McLaughlin Promenade was called a special use park, and obviously it's more than that. It's a community park now, and maybe at some point it'll be a regional park because we have so many tourists coming through there every day to see the development down below. So I'm wondering if there's maybe a possibility, not anytime soon, but to redesignate all the parks to go over that designation once more. John, or you had an idea about which ones still needed modification?
We can provide a presentation on the designation of the parks. There are some, the master plan, the 99 master plan lists kind of the definition of each of those areas and what constitutes a regional park versus a community versus a neighborhood versus a pocket park or a special use park, or I think linear park was also listed, which I think is what the promenade's currently listed as. But yeah, we can definitely provide that information and speak to how we're designating our parks and what that really means for the user. And I think to your point, it's more of the how the park is used and what it means to the community.
Yeah.
With that, our next meeting is on January 24th. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn.
So, yeah.